People ask what I do, and I tell them the truth. I work the floor at a plastics plant in Jackson, Indiana. I run a giant injection mold that hisses like a mad coffee pot and smells like hot oil and burnt rubber. It's not the kind of job you bring up at Thanksgiving. It's the kind of work where the machine doesn't care who your parents are, just that you show up. And I always did. I thought that was enough. I thought showing up meant something. It didn't. When I turned down my scholarship to stay and help after Dad passed, I figured my mom would understand. I thought she'd see it as love, loyalty, sacrifice. But in our house, loyalty only flows up. And Beverly wanted a lawyer, not a line worker. I didn't know I was disowned until she told the whole family without saying my name. She sent out a group text for Mother's Day. A picture of roses. The caption? To all my successful children, I'm proud of the people you've become. Some make choices that reflect our values. Others don't. I no longer count them among my children. I read that part twice. Then again. And I sat there on the cinder block stairs outside the factory, coffee cooling beside me, gloves in my lap, watching my name vanish from the digital family photo album. The worst part? Nobody said a word. Not my brother Joel. Not my sister Mandy. Not even our cousin Levi, who once called me the glue during Dad's funeral. Nobody tagged me. Nobody texted. They didn't just agree. They endorsed it. I didn't post anything. Didn't rage tweet. Didn't even reply. I just let the message burn itself into memory. Something went still inside me that day. Not broken. Just quiet. I deleted the group chat. Blocked the noise. Archived the photos I used to scroll through when I missed them. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I just stopped knocking on doors that were welded shut. I wasn't trying to be strong. I was trying to survive. Because if I had shown up to one more dinner pretending I wasn't bleeding, something in me would have cracked wide open. That night, I did the dishes with tears in my eyes. Not loud crying. Just the kind where your face gets wet without warning and you don't remember when it started. I wasn't grieving my mother. I was grieving the version of her I made up. The one who used to make lemon tea when I was sick. Who sang along to old country records while folding laundry. That woman died a long time ago. Maybe she never existed. And the next morning, I got up, put on the boots, went to work. Same line, same routine, same sarcastic jokes from Marcus about how I needed a nurse girlfriend so he could fake a back injury and get early retirement. I laughed, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't just clocking in anymore. I was building something. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it wouldn't involve asking for permission to exist. I didn't tell anyone at work what happened. Not Marcus, not the night shift guys, not even Rosa at the vending machine who always asks about my mom like she's still a regular character in my life. I just showed up, clocked in, let the machines sing their mechanical lullabies while I let silence grow roots in my chest. There's something about being erased that rewires your whole understanding of purpose. You stop looking to be noticed. You start needing to be useful. So I leaned into that. I stopped treating the factory like a place I had to survive. I started treating it like a system, a living, flawed, improvable machine. Why did the resin line clog every third shift? Why were we losing 30 minutes every Friday during pallet rotations? Why was the air pressure gauge on machine 6 off by just enough to cost us efficiency? I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just kept a notebook in my locker. Ideas, sketches, timings, notes scrawled in grease pencil and pen. When something broke, I tried fixing it differently. When I noticed a lag, I wrote down how we might reclaim it. I wasn't trying to climb the ladder. I was just proving, mostly to myself, that I wasn't dead weight. And then people started noticing. First it was Ben, the shift supervisor. He raised an eyebrow when I bypassed a shutoff valve without stopping the whole line. Just nodded and muttered, smart, like it cost him money to say it. Then came the questions from other guys. How do you unjam this thing so quick? You got a fix for that screw feeder hiccup? Mind showing me that shortcut again? I shared what I knew. Quietly. No ego. No, look what I did. Just a little tip here, a fix there. And slowly, the way factory gossip spreads like coffee rings, people started trusting me. Not out of hierarchy. Out of results. At home, I got quieter. I moved out of the old duplex and into a one-bedroom with concrete floors, thin walls, and a leaky faucet that sang at 3 a.m. But it was mine. No ghosts. No old photos staring at me. I filled the walls with prints I liked, blueprints, diagrams, an old framed ad for the Ford assembly line. A reminder that building things matters, even when no one's clapping. I bought a used bookshelf and stuffed it with manuals, lean ops, statistical process control, system thinking. I wasn't just learning, I was studying. Weekends became a rotation of books, YouTube lectures, and graph paper covered in flowcharts. Every shift I picked up, every improvement I made, it wasn't just labor, it was a brick. I was laying a foundation. For what? I didn't know yet, but I could feel it. Something steady, something real, something no one could cut me out of. The factory became less of a cage and more of a workshop. The rattle of the machines became a kind of rhythm, my rhythm. I wasn't chasing status. I wasn't out for titles. I just wanted to become undeniable. One night, after a long shift and a dinner of microwave noodles, I sat on the cold floor with a notebook in my lap, sketching out a redesign for how we stored our feedstock. And it hit me. I wasn't healing for her. I was healing in spite of her. I wasn't trying to return to the family dinner table. I was building my own damn table. It's strange how freedom can look like routine to everyone else. To the outside world, I was still just a guy who fixed machines, punched in early, stayed late, and brought tuna sandwiches from home. But inside, every week felt like an inch of new ground. A little more control. A little more clarity. I kept refining the systems in my notebook. Nothing massive, just changes that saved seconds here, a few materials there. Eventually, the savings added up. One week, I adjusted the packaging sequence to reduce waste. Next week, I rerouted downtime alerts through an old tablet we weren't using. The week after, I found a $400 per month leak in the logistics software nobody had caught in 2 years. I never made announcements, never asked for praise. But Ben, the shift lead who once called me extra quiet for someone so tall, started asking if I'd look over his efficiency reports. Then the plant manager, Troy, pulled me aside and said, "You got a head for systems. You ever think about taking a cert?" I shrugged. Maybe. Truth was, I'd already started one. It was a weekend course, lean manufacturing, operations analytics, and something called executive communication, which made me laugh because I barely spoke up at team huddles. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was ashamed, because I learned not to share anything I wasn't ready to protect. At home, the silence had become comfortable. I cooked dinner most nights, read chapters from my textbooks with a cup of coffee balanced on a milk crate table. Even the air felt clearer. Not cleaner, just mine. I didn't check social media, didn't keep up with my siblings. Joel and Mandy might have been running baby showers and vacation group chats without me, but I didn't feel left out anymore. I felt released, and that gave me space to grow. One afternoon, after a double shift and a long shower, I sat down with a textbook on operations flow and realized I'd read the chapter before. I was highlighting things I already knew, not because I remembered them from class, but because I'd lived them on the floor. I'd already been managing operations. Quietly. Invisibly. Well, that realization hit harder than any title. I wasn't just getting smarter. I was catching up to a version of myself I never thought I was allowed to become. I started applying the principles in real time, observing choke points, listening to complaints in the break room and mapping them against downtime, fixing one thing at a time without asking permission, just waiting to see what happened. And what happened? People started asking me to teach them. Not officially. Just a, "Hey, can you show me that?" in the middle of lunch. Or, "You mind walking me through your checklist?" after shift. They started looking to me. And for once, I didn't flinch. I wasn't chasing their approval. I just finally felt like I belonged somewhere, not because someone gave me a seat, but because I built one, bolt by bolt. One night, I walked home from work past a group of kids in graduation gowns taking selfies on the steps of Jackson High. Years ago, I would have looked away, wondered what they'd think of a guy in boots and grease-streaked coveralls. This time, I just nodded at them and kept walking. They didn't know what I'd built, and they didn't need to, because I did. They say most promotions happen behind closed doors. Mine started with a conversation in the break room next to a broken microwave. It was Troy, the plant manager, sipping day-old coffee from a mug that said, "World's okayest boss." He looked at me like he was deciding whether to ask for a kidney or a miracle. "Ethan," he said, "how do you feel about office walls?" I blinked. "Excuse me." He gestured to the clipboard in my hand, the one I'd been using to audit waste from the floor-to-bin flow. "You do more process work than anyone on staff. You just don't call it that." I shrugged. "Just fixing what's broken." "Exactly," he said. "That's what managers are supposed to do." That was the start of it. The formal title came 2 weeks later, Assistant Floor Operations Supervisor. It sounded corporate, but it meant I got a desk, a key fob that actually worked on the upstairs doors, and more importantly, input. Real input. I spent the first week sitting in on meetings I used to clean up after. People talked in circles about problems I'd already solved on paper. At first, I kept quiet, let them posture. But eventually, I started speaking up, one note at a time. A suggestion here, a correction there. And when those changes worked, they listened faster the next time. It was a strange kind of power, not the loud, top-down kind. The kind that grows in the quiet and earns space. I never raised my voice, but when I spoke, people stopped what they were doing. And that scared me more than I expected. Because for years, I thought I was the one who didn't belong. Now I was in the room where things changed. And I was the one changing them. I never forgot the floor. I still showed up in boots half the time, still walked the lines, still helped clear the occasional jam because old habits don't unlearn easy. But now people saw me differently, not as just a worker, but as someone who could see the whole map, not just the next step. Outside of work, I was still quiet. Still alone, most nights. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I finished my certification and enrolled in a second one, this time for industrial leadership. On Saturdays, I sat in a folding chair with a notebook and a coffee, surrounded by people who used words like KPIs and soft skill matrices. I didn't speak much there either, but I understood everything. Because unlike them, I wasn't speaking in theory. I lived this stuff. I knew what happened when a machine jammed on the Friday shift and why a 10-minute delay turned into a $100 loss. I knew how one broken part could cascade through a system like a bad decision in a family you used to love. Every lecture confirmed what I already suspected. I didn't need to change who I was. I just needed to keep becoming who I already was underneath. One afternoon, after giving a presentation on workflow reduction to a room of managers 3 titles above me, I walked past the front desk and saw a familiar face on a company newsletter. It was me, a feature in the company-wide bulletin, from shop floor to strategy, how Ethan Miller quietly reshaped our systems. They didn't even ask me for a quote. I didn't smile, but I folded the paper and tucked it into my bag. Not because I wanted to show anyone, but because sometimes it's okay to keep a receipt for yourself. The article made its way further than I expected. It started as a company bulletin feature, just a quick piece from HR about internal growth stories. But someone in regional saw it, then corporate. Then the head of Midwest operations forwarded it with the comment, "This is what leadership looks like from the ground up." Suddenly, I was getting invited to meetings I didn't even know existed. They called them strategy syncs, and I was the only guy in the room who still owned steel-toed boots. The others wore watches worth more than my car. They used phrases like holistic restructuring and vertical expansion. I didn't talk much until the data hit the screen. Then I'd raise a hand and say something like, "Actually, the rollout delay isn't from logistics. It's because Station B7's pre-feed is overloaded 3 hours per shift." And they'd blink at me, stunned, like someone's Alexa just developed a soul. Because I wasn't guessing. I knew the system better than they did. And that knowledge, that quiet, earned competence, spoke louder than any degree ever could. Troy pulled me aside after one of those meetings. Said, "I want to loop you into something more permanent. It's a new team, pilot projects, innovation, plant redesign. You'd be perfect." He called it strategic field integration. I called it a bigger whiteboard and more problems to solve. I said yes. The title changed again. Project Director. It came with a pay bump, a different badge color, and an office window. People started emailing me to align or circle back. I still preferred face-to-face. But here's the thing. None of it changed how I saw myself. Because that clarity had come long before the job title. That clarity came the day I realized I didn't need to be seen to be real. At night, I still walked home most days, even though I could have afforded a car upgrade. I liked the silence. The space between the world's expectations and my own. My apartment didn't get fancier. But it got fuller, bookshelves lined with certifications, blueprints, old copies of Wired and Operations Today. I kept everything that marked my journey, not for display, but for memory. To remind myself how far you can go when nobody's watching. That's why the message hit me like a ghost. It was a text from Mandy, my sister. Just 4 words. Mom saw the article. No punctuation. No warmth. Just the cold fact of it. I stared at it for a long time. Let the screen dim, then tapped it awake again. Not because I didn't expect it. Because I had hoped, for a while, I'd outgrown that kind of noise. Then came the second message, 2 days later. This one from a number I didn't recognize. But I knew the voice on the voicemail the second it played. "Ethan, it's Mom. I saw the news. I just wanted to say, I always knew you had potential. You just needed time to realize it. I'm proud of you. I told your aunt. We're all proud. That's when I understood. This wasn't reconciliation. This was reclamation. She didn't miss me. She missed the ability to point at me and say, "That's mine." I let the message play through twice, just to hear it without reacting. Then I deleted it. No reply. No, thanks. Because it wasn't for me. It was for her narrative. I'd lived without her for years. Built a whole life in the silence she left behind. I didn't need to reopen the door just because she suddenly wanted to pretend it was never shut. And still, I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. I went back to my desk, reviewed a supplier proposal, ate cold leftover pasta from a container with a crack in the lid. Because this was my life now. Not perfect, but mine. I thought that would be the end of it. A voicemail. A few indirect messages. Maybe a cousin accidentally liking one of my LinkedIn posts. But people like my mother don't go quietly. 3 weeks later, she showed up. Not at my apartment. Not at my home. At work. My assistant buzzed my office and said, "There's a woman downstairs. Says she's your mother." For a moment, I thought I misheard. Not because I didn't believe she'd show up, but because she still used that word, your mother, like it hadn't been revoked by her own hand years ago. I stood slowly, walked over to the window. My office looks out over the main entrance. And there she was, on the lobby bench, perfectly styled, sitting like she'd been invited. Purse in her lap. That same familiar pinched expression like the room owed her something. I didn't hesitate. I told security she was not to be let up. Not now. Not ever. They escorted her out politely. Professionally. She didn't make a scene, at least not in the lobby. But I watched from above as she paused just before exiting, looked up toward the glass, and mouthed something. I couldn't hear it. I didn't need to. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was disbelief. She truly thought she could just walk back into my life, like all those years of silence and exile could be overwritten with a photo op and a PR smile. Later that night, I told Mira, my wife. She listened, didn't say much, just put her hand on mine and whispered, "Good. I'm glad you didn't open the door." And I realized. I wasn't sad. Not even a little. I used to think closure required conversation, a confrontation, an apology. But it turns out, sometimes closure is just a door that stays closed, because you chose not to unlock it. The next morning, I went back to work like nothing happened. The factory still hummed. The whiteboards still filled. The problems still needed solving. And my name? It was now listed on the executive review panel for next quarter's plant design rollout. That was the moment it hit me. She had lost access not because I cut her off in rage, but because I'd outgrown the place where her version of me could still exist. She came looking for the son she used to define. But I wasn't him anymore. I was the man I built in her absence. And I didn't need her to see it. I just needed to keep walking. That weekend, I took my daughter to the park. She's 3, wild curls and jelly fingers. She pointed at the jungle gym and yelled, "Look, Daddy. I can climb." I smiled and said, "I know, baby. You always could." Later, as we watched the sunset from a rusty bench, she leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "You're the best daddy." And that's when it happened. All of it. Every cold message, every silence, every erasure, every time I wasn't counted, melted into nothing. Because I was chosen now. By the life I built. By the family I made. By the man I become. And I didn't need the past to recognize me. Because the future already did.